All right, looks like 6 o'clock. Good evening, everybody. Good to have you with me for our Wednesday evening study. Going to get into one of our parables of Jesus coming up in just a couple of minutes. First, I got a few announcements, some business to take care of. First, I'm sure you're aware, the COVID-19 numbers are up substantially in state of Alabama and in the Tallapoosa County area. I'm tracking those numbers along with some of the other leadership in the congregations, and over the next few days we're going to try to determine some sort of decision as to whether or not we can keep meeting in person. Unfortunately, if the numbers continue to rise like they are, we may have to suspend again for a little while and see if it'll settle back down. And so Friday afternoon, in the email Friday afternoon, pay close attention to that, because that's going to have the decision of whether or not, just like we've been doing for weeks now. Since we got back together, I think it was in August, in person, we've been doing every Friday, we've been mentioning, yes, we'll meet this Sunday. So if there's any change in that, the announcement will also come on the Friday afternoon email. So be very, very aware of that. If you're not on the email list, you can get on there very easily. Just let me know about it. Contact me, email me or call me or whatever, and let me know. I'll be glad to get you on the email list. Not only do you get the Friday email, you get the Tuesday email, which is another kind of update, devotional that goes out on Tuesdays and one time on Wednesday, but it's another story. Anyway, on Tuesdays and on Friday, you get those emails. And then anything else that pops up in between those times that needs to be taken care of, whether that's an announcement or a prayer request or any sort of urgent kind of business, I go ahead and push an email out to the whole list anytime we need to, in addition to Tuesday and Friday. But in particular on Friday, pay attention this week for that announcement as to whether or not we'll still get to meet in person. In the meantime, please pray for the health and safety of our community and in our world, in our country. It's a very difficult time. It has been, since all this broke in February and March, and it continues to be now, and it's going to continue to be for a while yet. Even with the vaccine, there's some lead-in time. At best, it's going to take some time to push that out to people that need it. And then, as I understand, with the vaccines, I think there's going to be some waiting in between multiple shots. So we're still with this for a while. Still, mask up if you have to go out. And I would say, if you don't have to go out, you don't have to get in crowds. Just don't do that. And if you do, wherever you do, make sure you mask up and make sure that you insist that other people do, because that helps control the spread. It's been proven to help control the spread. So please do that. For anybody that is only with online worship, that may be due to necessity for everybody in the near future, or it may just be those folks who have continued to just worship with us online all through the year. Since we started this way back in the spring, everybody joined in then, and then we've had some folks who haven't come back to in-person worship and have continued to do the online, and that's fine, that's great. And if you do that, you can do that through this channel on Sunday mornings and on Wednesday evening. We do it live here on Facebook Live, and then I copy them over to our Duncan YouTube page after that, so that they'll be available for anybody who doesn't have access or doesn't have an account on Facebook. Speaking of that, we're in process right now exploring some ways to improve the production values of that a little bit. As this has been going, we've tried to do the best we can with what we have, and then in trying to use our resources wisely. We don't want to just throw money at potential solutions and then have them not work. So we're consulting with some professional people who do this kind of thing, set up the infrastructure for streaming and online presence, and we're trying to roll out very soon. We're trying to roll out some improvements that I think you'll notice and I think you'll appreciate. The sound in particular on Sunday morning has been kind of an issue because we're set up and just kind of catching the in-house speakers for our sound. Without a direct line into our streaming machine, so that's been a little bit of a problem. I realize kind of hard to hear sometimes. You got three of the masks, and then you got the speakers in house trying to feed into a microphone, and sometimes that gets a little muddled. And I understand that, and I appreciate that, and we're trying to fix that, but we want to do it right. Once we get something set up, we want it to be our solution, and something that we can build on in the future, and not spend money on things that may or may not work. We've done a few adjustments so far, as we've gone through these months, and now we're trying to do something a little more comprehensive, and raise the production value, make it easier to hear, make it better video quality, everything, and just try to make the whole experience a lot better. So that is coming soon. In some shape, form, or fashion. We're working on it. I met with somebody yesterday, and we're discussing the infrastructure that'll be needed, and the equipment that we'll need potentially. And so we'll just have to run through that, see if we can get what we need and install it, and then we'll be up and running. But we will have some improvements coming in the near future on that kind of thing. So if you want to continue with the online worship through your personal necessity or our congregational necessity, that is fine, and we're trying to make that presence as good as we possibly can, and even better as we go forward. You can find out more about any of that at duncanumc.org, and if you want to invite somebody to join us on Wednesday night or Sunday morning online, or just to find out more about us, you can do that, duncanumc.org. As far as we know right now, Duncan and Sunny Level are still on, but we'll let you know whether or not we'll be suspending that Friday afternoon. Another piece of business: if you plan to be serving Christmas meals on Christmas morning, the last few years, just a little bit of background, the last few years we've been joining with Comer United Methodist Church and kind of teamed up on a Christmas morning meals for people who need them. And it has been an absolutely wonderful experience. I would highly recommend that as a way to start your Christmas morning, to go and to serve. And if you're planning to do that, a good way to help fund that whole meal project, as well as have a nice spiffy team look, we got these cool red t-shirts that say "Love Like Jesus" on the front, and Stephanie over at Comer found these t-shirts and is arranging for t-shirts to be bought for all the team. Okay, I think they're $20 each, and you need to get your order in soon if you're planning to serve. I understand we've got a great number of orders already in for people who are planning to be there on Christmas morning. But if you're planning to be there and you'd like a team t-shirt, please let Kathy Parker know no later than tomorrow. Now, here's the thing. You let her know how many and what size by tomorrow. You don't have to have the money until December 1st. All right, the money is due December 1st, but we need to get our orders in tomorrow, no later than tomorrow, Thursday the 19th. To be able to get all the t-shirts ordered as they need to be. So, number of shirts you need and the sizes of those turned in by tomorrow to Kathy Parker. Okay, she's kind of our organizer point for Duncan, and then she is coordinating with folks at Comer to be able to make that happen. So they need to know about that no later than tomorrow, and then your money would be due on December 1st. All right, so I think that is our business. I'm going to move to our prayer concerns, and one in particular that I learned about just this afternoon, and then one I learned about earlier today. This afternoon, I learned that John Eden has passed away. His family was in contact with him just a little while ago, and this afternoon, John passed at the hospital, and so do be prayerful for his family, his children and grandchildren, and so forth, as they're going to deal with arrangements and And then, of course, the grieving process of losing John, and we'll all miss John from our congregation. He's been a big part of this congregation for a long time, and well loved by so many people, and we will miss him. So be prayerful for his family after his passing this afternoon. Another need that I learned about earlier today, and I can't share a name because of privacy concerns, but I learned about a Marine veteran who is in need of either a medical or a mechanical scooter or an electric wheelchair. Okay, a mechanical scooter or an electric wheelchair. He's really in need of one of those type things to be able to get around. And so if you maybe have a piece of equipment like that that's around, it's not being used, maybe somebody you knew used it a while back and they don't need it anymore, or maybe they passed and you still have the equipment, or if you know of somebody who might have either a mechanical scooter or an electric wheelchair, please let me know about that, and I'll get the information to the people that I need to let know about that. But we're just kind of putting the word out. So if you or anybody you know may have something like that, it could be well used by this gentleman who really needs that. So that's a need that came up earlier today. Others in need of prayer right now include Christopher Jones. That is a grandnephew of Darlene Worthy. Allie Broom and her family. The Worthy family, of course. John Williams, Peanut Spates, Pat Kirk, still undergoing treatment. Sharon and Tommy Hickman. Tommy lost his sister yesterday. And he also has a brother that is not doing well right now. The Sewell family, Ingram family, Dawn and Dale Brazel, and Carol Miller. Those are all particular points of needed prayer right now. So do remember those folks. They go out. That list goes out with the email, so you'll have it in written form. But do try to remember those who are in need of prayer right now. And let's just have a quick word of prayer, and then we'll get to our study for the night. And gracious God, as we gather tonight, we look for your presence. We look for you to be with us in whatever struggles we have going. Whatever anxiety we may have right now. Uncertain times in a lot of ways, and so we have to work through this, but we know we don't have to work through it alone. We ask that your Spirit would be present to us in a special way to help us along our way. In particular, we pray for the folks that we just mentioned, the Yidden family, now grieving the loss of John. All these others that we've mentioned that are receiving treatments or dealing with illness or grieving themselves over losses that they've suffered earlier this year. God, we pray that you'd lift them up and give them strength. Help each person as you know they need to be helped. Heal them as you know they need to be healed. Help them to find the strength and the grace and the peace that can be found in you. Help our world and all those who are sick, all those who are trying to serve in the medical community, the people who are so tired and so taxed right now, trying to care for others day after day. Help them as they go about their calling. And help us to step into our calling to reach out wherever we can, to connect wherever we can, and to serve in whatever ways we can, even though we may be separated by space. We may not be able to be physically close a lot right now. But help us to be creative, to find those talents and gifts that you've given each of us to serve as your people in our own way that you've called us to do. And now as we look at this scripture tonight, guide our thoughts, help us to find what you need us to find and need us to hear in this parable that we'll talk about this evening. And we pray all these things in Christ's name. Amen. All right. So tonight, we are going to talk about a manager, a not-so-good manager, that is found in Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16. It's kind of a long passage, but we start in verse 1. Jesus told his disciples, "There was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, 'What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer.' The manager said to himself, 'What shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses.' So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' 900 gallons of olive oil,' he replied. The manager told him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, 'And how much do you owe?' 1,000 bushels of wheat,' he replied. He told him, 'Take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." All right, so there is our parable. And you know, you've probably, if you're like me, you've looked at news, or you've seen stories that have happened, or maybe even in your personal life, you've run or professional life, you've run across people who, in some way, messed up with what they were entrusted with, either outright embezzling something, or manipulating in some way to enrich themselves in a dishonest way, or maybe somebody who was just inept, somebody who was just not good at what they were doing, or they were lazy about it and just didn't pay attention, and things just kind of fell apart, you know, with their job or their business or whatever it was that they were entrusted with. And you think, wow, you know, you'd think people would care a little more than to do that kind of shenanigans. And you might think, especially if you've ever been like in a higher level management position or something, you watch people and stuff like that develops, you know, where they either manipulate things and mess them up, or they're just inept or lazy and mess things up. You think, man, it is so hard to get good help. You know, it's so hard to find good, honest people to do things properly, right? But then if we flip that into God's world, I think we could probably safely say that God knows better than anybody how hard it is to get good, dependable workers. Does he not? You know, if we're called to a particular thing, you know, we even in knowing that, you know, you're called by God to do something in your corner of the world, you know, and either put it off, or you ignore it, or maybe do it half-hearted, or just forget about it sometimes or something like that, you know. And I would have to say, as a person who is called to do work for the kingdom in certain ways, you know, I come up short, I mess up things, but I don't think it'd be defensive to say I'm not the only one who messes up our jobs for God from time to time. And you know, Jesus left us with several stories that are sometimes hard to really wrap our brains around, and this may be one of the hardest. This may be one of the strangest stories that he left with us. This rich man, Jesus says, he has a manager, and the manager is squandering the man's money or his property. And Jesus doesn't say here, it doesn't qualify, is the man being intentionally fraudulent, or is he just being incompetent or lazy? I'm kind of inclined, as Callis says in his book, I'm kind of inclined to agree that this man is probably just incompetent, or maybe just kind of lazy. But it's a serious thing, you know, when you're squandering the resources of the person who has enabled you to be able to do a job. You know, you've been hired to manage something, you've been hired to take care of something, and you squander that for whatever reason, you waste it. That's a serious thing. You're entrusted with something and then you waste it. That's bad news. This guy is failing in the one thing that he has been hired to do. And so the rich man comes to him and he says, you know, what is this I'm hearing about you? You need to give me an accounting of what you've been doing. I hear you've been messing this up, so you're going to have to give me an accounting of whatever it is that you're doing. And by the way, you're going to be fired. Did I mention you're going to be fired? Just kind of clean out your desk, pack that box, and show me where the books are, sort of moment. And it's an awkward, sort of painful scene, I guess. But at the same time, with what we know, we would feel like the manager probably deserves to get fired at this point. But before the manager starts totaling up the books for this final report, he assesses his own situation. You know, he's saying, well, I'm getting fired. What am I going to do here? And he shows a little bit of wisdom. Maybe not the most honest wisdom, but we'll get to that. But you know, there are times, I think, like he shows, that we have to have, you know, an honest talk with ourselves. You know, to make an honest assessment of ourselves. You know, when the manager asks himself what he's going to do when he loses his job, he starts running through this worst case thing, you know, talking about, oh, well, you know, I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg, and I don't know, maybe he's underestimating what he could do if push comes to shove. I don't know. Is he strong enough for not to dig, or is that just something he thinks, you know, or maybe his pride is in the way to say that he couldn't beg. He couldn't imagine himself begging, so he didn't want to get in the ditches, and he doesn't want to have to beg, so he's running through all these worst case sort of things. Suddenly this light bulb comes up above his head, and he thinks of something. He's got his idea, and he comes up with a pretty clever idea. It's not very honest, like I said, but it is clever. He's going to go to some of the debtors, and he's going to offer them reduced payment. You know, kind of like those commercials you see a lot where, you know, if you owe money to the IRS, we can settle it pennies on the dollar, that kind of thing, right? That's what he comes up with, you know. Cut the jugs of olive oil that are owned in half, or owed in half. The wheat that's owed, that's almost cut in half. And maybe he's thinking he can get a quicker payment by offering the discount. You know, if you offer the person who owes, you know, you can pay about half for this, and we're going to clear the books on you. It's not a bad deal for them. And it says, you know, his plan is kind of feathering a nest with these folks so that when he is fired, he can go to them maybe get a job with them because, you know, hey, wasn't I the guy who cut you a deal? Didn't I cut you a deal? Now you can give me a job, right? So he's trying to cover himself in a couple of different ways. Make some friends with the debtors to maybe get a job. Maybe salvage his current job by getting a whole bunch of payment in real quickly here at the end. And this manager, he's a little bit of a, you know, duck and dodge kind of guy. And you expect that his employer would treat him as the shifty, duck and dodging kind of guy that he is. Instead, in verse 8, he praises him for it. He praises him for what he just did, saying that he acted shrewdly. Right? And then he adds, it's kind of a confusing verse that we're gonna unpack in a few minutes. But he says, you know, the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And then Jesus, you know, adds this sort of little piece of a sermon here, and he says, you know, whoever's faithful with a little is going to be faithful with much. Whoever's dishonest with a little is going to be dishonest with much. And so if you haven't been faithful, who's going to trust you with riches? If you've not been faithful with what belongs to another, who's going to give you stuff that's your own? You know, it's this parallel sort of sermon that he follows the parable with. And like I said, this is a strange story. It's an odd story to try to wrap our brains around. And you know, we've kind of been with the Cowles books, the couple of different books that J. Ellsworth Cowles has written about, you know, these parables from the backside. That's kind of where we've been tracking and talking about, you know, finding the backside of the parable, right? And this one is just all kind of backside because it's just odd. All the characters are kind of shady. The manager, you know, he's a bad employee. And then he went to this shady sort of solution to try to somehow fix his time of being a bad employee. The debtors are kind of shady too. I mean, you know, who can blame them? But they do kind of jump in on this questionable scheme that's going on. And then the boss throws us for a twist because he praises the manager for what he does here that is kind of shady. And you know, this isn't the only time that Jesus has kind of questionable characters making a point in a parable, really. You know, the guy who found the treasure in the field, and he went and bought the field in Matthew 13. If he were really being honest and upfront and transparent, you know, he probably would have mentioned when he went and bought the field, you know, this is why I'm buying it, so that the owner could, you know, sort of reassess if they want to sell it or not. That probably would have been the, you know, scrupulously honest thing to do. The parable about being persistent in prayer. He tells about this judge that is, the judge didn't fear God or respect people, and yet he gives the persistent widow the justice that she pesters him for. And Jesus is very sophisticated this way in telling stories to make us stop and think, like this one that we're looking at tonight. We have to stop and think about this one. Unless we're just going to gloss it over and forget about it, we have to stop and kind of think about this, because it's not a clear-cut sort of good guy, bad guy, white hats, black hats kind of situation. You know, I mean, and that's the way we look at stories a lot of times. You know, we want to know clearly who's the hero and who's the villain. But in Jesus' story, there's a sophistication about it, and I think personally, being a fan of, you know, storytelling and crafting a story and things like that, I think there's a lot to be said for that, because it does make us think. It does make us go places rather than just a simple good guy, bad guy sort of thing. When you have to deal with characters that are not all good or all bad, kind of gray, They call them gray hats. It's the white hats or black hats, right? When we have to deal with that, it makes us, I think, appreciate a story a lot more, and it helps us find a lot more in the story. Jesus is right up there telling these stories. I mean, on the level of the best novelist or movie maker or whatever, with complex characters that we have to think about a little bit. So what is Jesus saying in this strange story? And we can start to think through it, and I'm going to offer you some suggestions tonight. But I think I could say with some confidence that he is not offering business advice here. I don't think this is a business advice story, because, well, if nothing else, he closes the story with with this warning that you can't serve two masters. You can't serve God and wealth. So it's still kind of cast in business in sort of a, you got to put that in on the second slot, on the second shelf below God sort of way. So it's not elevating business as this is the thing you want to do. I don't think it's a story about being a business owner or a debtor or even a manager. I mean, we're told that the Pharisees love money in this same section, the same chapter of Luke, and they were offended by some of the things that he talks about here. And it's quite possible that this parable is directed at them for that. They were the first ones who heard it. They were the ones that reacted to it in chapter 16. And Jesus tells them, in all sorts of situations, he tells these certain Pharisees, and this is by no means all the Pharisees, but some of the Pharisees that he was dealing with, he talks to them about how they are not properly managing what God has given them. He tells them that, he sees what they do, and they are not handling what they've been entrusted with in a proper way. The things that are God's, that they've been handed and given responsibility for, they're not handling it real well. So maybe this parable is first crafted toward them. But let's put the Pharisees to the side for just a second and take the lasting impact of this story and talk about us. All right, what this might be saying to us, what this parable might be saying to us. Of course, I think we could say safely that the rich man, the business owner in this story, we could say symbolically that is God. God's the richest landowner we know, right? And God has sort of hired us as managers of God's riches, right? All of us, whoever we are, if we're on earth, if we're rich or poor or in between, well known or not, I think all of us, whether we know it or not, are the managers. All right, if we're trying to follow God in particular, we are hired managers of God's resources and God's wealth and God's riches. And we are supposed to manage that. We've been given whatever. We could say our abilities, our money, our personality, our talents, whatever that God has given us. We are supposed to be managers of that. And it says the manager in this parable is squandering or wasting the master's property. All right, so I start thinking a little bit about what we talked about Sunday morning, about the talents and the abilities that each of us has been given. And as I said earlier, I don't necessarily think that this manager in this parable was being malicious or intentionally defrauding the business owner. I don't get the idea that he was embezzling things or whatever. I think maybe he was just careless. Maybe he was just lazy. Maybe he was just incompetent. Just didn't do it right for whatever reason. And it seems like he had been getting by with it. Maybe some commentators that write about, commenting on Scripture, say that maybe he lived a good distance away from the man who owned all of this. So they're operating at a distance. The owner just gets, his cut or whatever. He thinks that's the way things are going, and doesn't really know that the manager is wasting things. Doesn't have a whole lot of hands-on contact with the business because it's at a distance. All right. So this guy seems to have been getting away with it, at least for a while. Now, for whatever reason, word's gotten back to the big boss that he's being careless and squandering things, and that carelessness has kind of caught up with him. Somebody's brought the charge, and this is a wake-up call. When the boss gets in contact with him and starts wanting answers, it's a wake-up call. But originally, at least early in the story, it looks like it's come too late. He's about to get fired. There's not a whole lot of, well, let's look at this and see what we can do. It's you don't need to be the manager anymore. But as it turns out, not all was lost as we might have thought at the beginning. Maybe that assessment that he took of himself and what he'd been doing, maybe that's the first time in a while he's done that. He's just been going about his business, doing his thing, and maybe for the first time he's really having to take stock of his actions, because this has caught up with him, and the boss has come calling, and my job's on the line. And maybe that creativity that we see here, the scheme that he comes up with, maybe that was some of the talent that the boss hired him for in the first place. He can think on his feet, he can come up with good ideas. Maybe he's demonstrating a little bit of that. So when he goes into this question of what can he do with all these overdue accounts, like we said a few minutes ago, by discounting them, maybe he could bring some money, real quickly in for his boss. Maybe he could feather his nest later on, but in any case, he's trying to creatively make things happen. And the irony here is that creatively making things happen, running things efficiently, making things happen as a manager, that's what he should have been doing the whole time. He does it under pressure here, which I guess is good, and that's what he gets praised for, but he should have been doing this all along. I mean, we got to think, if he could come up with this idea on the spur of the moment, then all this time that he's been just kind of noodling around and wasting things, he could have been this efficient then, just like he is now. But whatever the case, when he does this, when he comes up with this plan, the boss is pleased. This is good. Hey, I like this. And for all we know, the boss may have said, maybe I didn't mess up when I hired this guy. Obviously, he can think on his feet, and he comes up with good plans. Maybe he just needed a good little, kick in the seat of the pants to get going. And maybe now he'll amount to something. He'll do something right, like I hired him to do in the first place. And so maybe with this parable, Jesus is trying to give us sort of a kick in the pants to say, better management is needed. More creativity, more thinking on our feet. Better management is needed, right? In his parable, the owner demanded that this manager give an account. Give me an account of what you've done. And we've probably all heard this in a sermon somewhere, sometime, that we're all, as God's people, we're all going to be called to give an account of what we've done. Don't know all the specifics on that, but we're all, I think Scripture points to the idea that we're all going to, in some shape, form, or fashion, all going to have to give an account of what we've done or not done with our lives and what we've been given by God. God's going to ask us, what have you done with what I gave you, with what I entrusted you with? We could think big. We could think taking care of resources, in a big sort of way, and our role in being responsible stewards of God's creation. Or we could bring it down to a personal level, and we could say there's going to be some sort of account of what we did with the brain God gave us, with the personality that God gives us, with the social skills, with the talents, with whatever we've been given. Whatever it is that God has loaned us for this life, we're going to have an account of what we did with it. How have we used those resources? How have we used those talents, those abilities, those capabilities? How have we used those to be a blessing to others? You know, we talk about this all the time, being blessed to be a blessing, right? What have we done with what we've been blessed with to bless somebody else? Or better question, have we used those things to bless others? Or have we squandered them? Have we wasted them? Have we been lazy or inept or whatever, and have we wasted them? And that confusing line that we talked about earlier in verse 8, let's try to break that down just a little bit. In verse 8, Jesus says, you know, the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. Okay? So what is he saying there? I think he's saying that the children of this age are better in their pursuits than the children of God are in their pursuits, or the children of light are in their pursuits. Right? People who are dealing in the world give it a whole lot more effort to make money, to acquire power, to whatever, than the children of God give effort to being a blessing to others and witnessing to the good news and bringing people into the family and fellowship of God. All right? People who are pursuing the things in the world do it a whole lot hotter and harder than people of God do, pursuing the things that we're supposed to be pursuing. You know? We could think maybe God looks at somebody who's selling things, right? And they're just relentless. They are just they go day after 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. They're just at it because they want to sell, they want to succeed, they want to get rich, they want to acquire things, right? And maybe God looks at that and goes, wow, he's really digging in trying to get rich. Are my children doing the same thing with the same effort in trying to bless others, bring others into the fellowship of God, be a blessing, be a help, be a witness to the good news? Is that much effort, the same effort that guy who is just doggedly pursuing getting rich, is that much effort going into the things of God? So I think maybe that's what's going on in that verse. Right? The manager in this parable, he is incompetent through whatever means, laziness or just lack of wherewithal to do his work. And he gets scared at this point of pressure. Oh, I'm going to lose my job. He gets scared into action. Now, he follows a point that's kind of ethically questionable. But you have to say this for him. When he was in trouble, he got it together. When he was at that moment of crisis, that moment of I am going to lose my job, he woke up and started getting things done. It may not be pretty, but he did get things done. And this is the parable that Jesus told, headed to Jerusalem. All right, at this point, Luke 16, Jesus has said that he is headed to Jerusalem. There's that line, especially in the old translations, that say he has set his face toward Jerusalem. And when Jesus starts looking to Jerusalem for that last visit there, we know what's going to happen. The last time Jesus goes to Jerusalem, he's going to go there to be tried, and he's going to go there to die. So everything leading up to that, from that point on, in Luke chapter 9, when he starts setting up, when he starts talking about being set toward Jerusalem, everything from there gets really urgent. We are at a point of crisis there. This is where things got to get done. Okay, so I'm not going to mince words with you. I'm not going to be necessarily very polite about it. Jesus is saying this. You know, I'm not gonna tap dance around here. I'm going to be very direct. Everything from that point on kind of takes on sort of a crisis, impatient kind of tone about it. He means business. Time is counting down to the day when he's going to be crucified. He's going to be betrayed. He's going to be killed. And so a lot of the things that he talks about in his final journey to Jerusalem get really no nonsense. All right. So if he's saying you got to wake up, and you may stumble a little bit, you may not do it quite right, but you got to wake up and you got to do the management that I'm calling you to do. All right. He's trying to give them a kick, to get them jump started, because things are urgent at this point. You know, he's saying, you know, how can people who are just trying to get something as temporary as money, how can they give so much imagination and so much energy and so much time into doing that? And you're not giving the same amount of time or energy or effort to the things I'm asking you to do. Where are the good managers? You know, why are the children of the world wiser and more go-getter than the children of light? He says. All right, so why is that? Why is that their difference? I think that's what he's trying to drive home here, and it's very urgent. It's wrapped in a very odd story here, but I think that's what Jesus is trying to get at here. Why are the children of the world more of a go-getter than the children of the light? And so going back to the idea of us as managers, I think this is a wake-up call for us as the managers of what God has loaned to us, as the managers of what God has put us in charge of and responsible for. We should be as go-getter about that management as we are of anything else. This is our wake-up call, and it's our chance. You know, if we want to put ourselves in the seat of this bad manager to say, this is our chance to save our job. This is our chance so that when the accounting comes, we get something to show for it. Something other than just kind of sort of doing the routine, right? We've got a go-getter thing to be able to show for what we've been entrusted with. So much like we were talking about Sunday morning, like I said, this reminded me a lot of what we talked about Sunday morning with talents that we're given. All our talents, all our gifts, everything that we are given, everything that we are entrusted with. God is saying, be good managers of that. Use that. Be creative about it. Be energetic about it. Just use it like it was given to you to use. All right, so there's our parable for tonight. We'll get to another next week. I think we're going to stay in the Gospel of Luke, maybe backtrack just a little bit, but we'll get another one Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. We'll be together in worship one way or another Sunday morning, whether it is in person at Sunday Level in Duncan, or if it is just online only. We'll find that out by Friday afternoon, late Friday afternoon. I'll send that out in the email, so be sure and pay attention to that. We'll get the announcement on what we're going to do for this weekend. But in any case, hope to see you, whether it's in person or online. Hope to see you Sunday morning at 11. Have a great night and a blessed rest of the week. Good night.